Top of the morning to you, Nigeria, and welcome to What's Your Take, a weekly news program in which Nigerians from all walks of life get to express their opinions on the big stories that broke the previous week and which have the potential to impact our daily lives and well-being. My name is Dayo Akintobi, and I will be taking us through those stories that made the headlines this past week. Well, as you all know, today is a significant day because President Buhari is visiting Lagos. He's here on a 2-day working visit to commission some projects. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, he's not here to commission the big one that we were all looking forward to. That's the Dangote refinery. Despite everything that's been said, unfortunately, that project is not ready to come on stream yet. So he's not going to be commissioning that one today. However, having said that, he will commission the Lekki Deep Sea Port, which is a very big project for the federal government and for Lagos. He will also commission the rice mill at Imota around Ikorodu, and he will commission the Blue Line light rail train in Lagos, which is something we've all been looking forward to. So President Buhari, we welcome you to Lagos, and we wish you a pleasant and fruitful stay. And to all Lagosians who are being disrupted, whose schedules are being disrupted by this with the detours and the road closures, well, it's just another experience that we have to go through to live in this metropolis. So grin and bear it and consider it something for the best for all of us. All right, having said that, with me on the program this morning is our newscaster, Yetunde Afolabi, who will be telling us all about the big stories we'll be discussing today. Good morning, Yetunde.
Good morning, Mr. Dayo, and a very good morning, Nigeria.
I'm certain you have a bunch of interesting material to share with us. Last week saw some significant developments across the country that made the headlines.
It was indeed a bumper news week. Let me get to it without further ado. The stories for this program were culled from the headlines and pages of the mainstream newspapers across Nigeria, including The Sun, Daily Trust, Leadership, Vanguard, The Nation, Punch, Guardian, Nigerian Tribune, New Telegraph, and This Day. The really big story of last week is the lingering fuel crisis and the hardship being experienced by Nigerians, from the scarcity of the product and its high cost at the few locations where it is available. Worst of all, there seems to be no end in sight to this problem. Some of the headlines that spoke to this issue during the week include: fuel scarcity bites harder. Marketers blame the National Oil Company, NNPCL. Fuel crisis won't end soon, say government, marketers. List insecurity, dollar scarcity, crude swap problem as challenges. Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, MOMAN, says only fuel subsidy removal will stop fuel scarcity. Queues are caused by high demand in bottlenecks in the fuel distribution chain. Gradual removal of petrol subsidy starts in April. Price hike, NNPCL keep mum. Major Marketers Association blames logistics. Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva, says no increase in PMS pump price. The second major news story for today is about the fears and frustration mounting among Nigerians over the scarcity of the new naira notes, even as the deadline nears for the exchange of old notes, and the Central Bank of Nigeria remains adamant about not extending the deadline. Some of the headlines that address this, issued during the week, include: CBN accuses banks of hoarding billions of new naira notes, threatens sanctions. CBN deepens sensitization on the new naira notes and new cash withdrawal policy at major markets across Nigeria. CBN meets with POS agents on Monday. Supermarkets, eateries reject old notes. CBN introduces cash swap policy for new currency in villages, other rural outposts. State governors. Nigerians are facing huge challenges over naira redesign. Clash with Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, over cash withdrawal policy. From today, all Nigerians can exchange old notes for new notes at deposit money banks. Our next news item for today is the Edo train abduction of the previous week and the subsequent rescue of the victims by a combined team of police, DSS, vigilantes, and hunters. Is this a ray of hope that a solution to combat the kidnapping scourge has finally been found? Some of the headlines that address this issue during the week include: 1. Armed herdsmen invade Igweben train station in Edo State on Saturday, January 7, and abduct 32 persons. Police working with the vigilante and hunters comb through the bush around the area and apprehend one suspect who begins helping police with their investigation. 6 victims are rescued just 2 days after the incident. 1 week after the incident, all 32 victims have been rescued and 10 suspects arrested, including 2 village chiefs who allegedly gave assistance, to the kidnappers. Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki stated that no money was paid for the release of the victims, as special forces engaged in a joint operation and overpowered the kidnappers and rescued the hostages. We paid 2 million naira to the kidnappers for my sister's release, laments a family member of one of the kidnapped victims. Next in the queue for today is the so-called Chatham Housization of Nigerian politics. There's a mad rush of Nigerian politicians to speak at the British think tank Good for Our Democracy and Self-Pride. The background to this big story is that in the past week, first the presidential candidates of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, and then the presidential candidates of the NNPP, Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, and then topped off by the chairman of Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Prof. Mahmood Yakubu, all visited Chatham House in London to address its executives, and a diverse audience on the upcoming Nigerian elections. And our final big story for today is on the resurgence of COVID. 42 new COVID-19 infections have been reported in Nigeria. Some of the headlines that address this issue during the week include: 1. Despite the new cases, federal government rules out imposition of restrictions. Chinese authorities express concern over outbreak of deadly flu. 3. Unknown flu. Federal government may reintroduce COVID-19 measures as 3 Nigerians die in China, 7 in critical condition. And that's all the stories we have for you in this edition of What's Your Take? I will now hand back to Mr. Dio, who will introduce our guests who are in the studio today to give their opinions on these issues. Over to you, Mr. Dio.
Thank you, Yetunde. And what a week of news it was, from fuel scarcity to new naira notes scarcity to the reappearance of COVID-19. Last week was a hectic week on the news front. Politics, of course, was not left out. There were the brickbats thrown at each other by the presidential candidates of APC and PDP, lawsuits seeking to disqualify, and petitions demanding arrest, anti-party suspensions and voluntary defections. The political sector was rife with intrigue, scheming, gamesmanship, and one-upmanship. Add to that the seeming must-do visit to Chatham House, and we have an election in the making. Well, D-Day is just slightly over 1 month away, so we can just imagine the vaudeville show that awaits us in the coming days. Go ahead and grab a bottle of Coca-Cola and some cabin biscuits, and armed with your PVC, claim a spot in the queue at your polling booth to play your part in what will likely be the definitive event in the trajectory of Nigeria's destiny in the 2020s. Joining me to take a look at the big stories that dominated the headlines last week is Olukemi Onabanjo. Olukemi is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. She has several years' experience as a chartered accountant and is currently a consultant in strategic human resources and business re-engineering. Olukemi currently makes her home on the island after growing up for over 25 years on Lagos mainland. We'll take a break, and when we come back, you will meet Olukemi and my other guests. Okay, welcome back. It's What's Your Take? And today, as I mentioned earlier, we are joined by Olukemi Onabanjo. Good morning, Olukemi. Thank you for joining us on What's Your Take today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also joining me to add breath to our discussion on the big stories of the past week is Prince Marcus Ogunchusi. Prince Ogunchusi is an entrepreneur. He prefers to be referred to as a trader. He's based in Magodo, Phase 2. Good morning, Prince. Thank you for joining us on What's Your Take today.
Good morning, fellow Nigerians. Thank you for having me on the show.
Very good.
It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for joining us. Very good. So as we heard our newscaster Yetunde go through the list of the big stories of last week, let's take the one about the lingering fuel scarcity, because that has hit all of us where it hurts. And even this morning, just getting to the studio was a challenge for all three of us, as this issue of fuel scarcity, fuel queues, traffic, and there's also the intriguing aspect of the fact that we've now developed a parallel market in the fuel sector, to where there are some stations that are selling at a lower price, those who get it from the NNPC directly, and those who are getting from the private depots are selling at a higher price. And government in itself said last week that it has not raised any price. So what is the point of, since we've not removed the subsidy and we've not deregulated, how do you see, Kemi, what's your take on this notion of the fact that the government is saying it hasn't increased prices, but yet prices have increased all the way above board? Is government a toothless bulldog now in this issue of fuel?
Thank you. I don't feel they are, but I think the reality on ground is that individual marketers and major marketers all have their different pricing strategies, and all of them are playing out now. If you look at the value chain of bringing in diesel or petrol or aviation fuel into this country, there are a lot of players. There's the marketers, there's the logistics, there's the tanker drivers. It is so fragmented. And until you have a very, very efficient value chain from the beginning to the end, we're still going to continue to stumble on this. Added to this is there's no accountability. There's nobody being held responsible for when we have issues like this. Aviation fuel is hiccup, petrol is hiccup. We have filling stations now that are charging 250 naira. We have some charging 180 naira. In Port Harcourt, they're charging 600 naira, 700 naira. This is telling us that yes, they will deregulate soon. But it's scary because you're deregulating and there's still so much inconsistency in the value chain. We continue to wait and we continue to pray, but it is very, very worrisome. We don't know what has caused this recent 2 weeks chaos, because it has been chaotic, especially after Christmas. Depending on who you ask, they have different reasons.
Very good. Prince, do you think it's a coincidence? Looking at it from a conspiracy theory point of view now, for those who have conspiratorial minds, doesn't it look too coincidental that at the run-up to an election, we're having a lingering problem like this? Do you think there's sabotage involved? Do you think it's incompetence on the part of the government? Yes, in the recent past, there have been sporadic fuel scarcity problems, but none has been sustained extensively, at least in the last 7 years or so. We've had them off and on, come and go. But this particular one seems to have stretched for much longer than we've been used to in the recent past. Do you see this as possibly an intentional move by some people to either malign the party in power, sabotage the process, gain some advantage towards themselves in the coming election? Do you see something untoward or underhanded going on here?
Thank you very much for the question. For us as a people, I think there's so much tied to us when it comes to conspiracy theories. And I refer to us, some Nigerians, that they are the greatest conspiracy theorists in the world, because we are quick to add that to every issue. Now, what we have on ground that is happening right now, you can't take the players away from the issues, because most of the politicians have their hands in the oil and gas industry. They are, as a matter of fact, they're the biggest player in the sector. So if we want to align that, this could be the reason why we're having this unending fuel crisis. Because in the last 6.5 years, we've not had one that is this prolonged. We'll have a short one, maybe a week, and it will disappear. But this now, as we get closer to the election, it will look like it's going to go tomorrow when you wake up. you just discover that the queue are getting longer. So when you say, what do we have against the government? That is from the opposition part of you now. It's okay, let's present them before the electorate as being failed. Now, if they are failures, it is because the political parties, all of them are all but one. Those in government and those in the opposition. Because you never hear about Nigerian when we talk about Nigerian. You only hear about their interests. So these issues now is about, okay, the government is playing about, let's deregulate, let's commence a month after the election, after all the elections. That is, they are speculating April now. Okay, some of the players are saying, okay, let's make it impossible for them to even get there. Again now, let's see how much money we can quickly make before the regulation proper. There's another dimension to it now that it could even be tied to the opening of the Dangote refinery. That, okay, let's push it to the highest that we can, so that by the time the Dangote refinery come on stream, then they can begin to sell from the point of how much Nigerians now have accepted to pay for premium, which is a minimum liter of fuel. So if you look at the issues generally, you cannot detach the multi-dimension players to it. It's not just a problem of, initially when it started, they said it was a war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine was making vessels impossible to come over to Africa. But now we have discovered that the crisis in Nigeria had players actively ready to make sure that we don't get out of it very soon.
And the man in the street, the average Nigerian, is the one who bears the brunt of, as usual, is the man in the street who bears the brunt of whether you want to call them scheming, manipulations, shenanigans, however they may be. And that is quite unfortunate. But well, we hope that one way or another the issue is resolved very quickly, so that if they're going to remove the subsidy and deregulate, let's do it and get it done so we can go about our normal lives. I believe that my take is that the average Nigerian won't mind paying as long as we can get the product. Yeah. But at this point, we just want products so that we can go about our daily lives. We can run away from the regulation
if it guarantees us availability.
Availability is key.
And stressless product. Because when you have to leave your house each day, I've never done it. I've never get myself on the queue for 1 minute. I don't, because I don't have that patience. But each time I do come out and see people on the queue, I just say, look,
it breaks your heart.
This is time wasted.
It breaks your
heart. How can you leave your house on queue on the queue? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. You have so many other things to do with your time. And you don't know the adage. I said, even if you don't have nothing doing, you sleep at home.
And thank you for that, Prince. And let's move on to the next issue that is hitting us in our pocketbooks, which is this issue of the new naira. I don't know about you, and I don't know how it's working for you, but I do know that the banks are not giving out the naira as easily as they should. The latest news that came out between yesterday and the day before was that we'll be able to exchange our old notes for new ones. But the bottom line is that there's still a scarcity of the new notes till today. Even the banks that are giving them out are rationing them. Now, CBN is saying it's not going to extend the deadline beyond the 31st. Now, market women, eateries, some petrol stations, they're not accepting the old notes anymore because they're all scared of the fact that come January 31, the money will go obsolete in their hands. How do we reconcile this gap between supply and demand of the new notes, Kemi?
I get worried when CBN threatens banks because they say that they have the product availability, they have the new notes there, and the banks are not picking it up. And the banks are like, how is this possible? What CBN is doing, really, they are the only ones that are empowered to do this. Yes, you can change a currency note, but we need to look at the time frame. You tell us there's 3.2 trillion in circulation, in money in circulation. You tell us 80% of it is outside the banking system. That's 2-point-something trillion. You tell us in 6 weeks you've only managed to maybe bring in 1-point-something trillion. Can we really use this 6 weeks to bring in all the naira outside and exchange? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And the logistics of it and the fact that this is something that is affecting the entire country, one needs to just sit back and be careful. By the 31st of January, I honestly don't know what is going to happen. Fortunately, with those of us in urban areas, a lot of us are used to ATMs, so the reality is we did not have as much cash that we would have normally have had. But really, if you want us to move from a cash system to a system with alternate e-channels, there has to be timing and there has to be efficiency of these e-channels. The reality is right now a disputed transaction in a bank, they tell you your funds will be refunded in 7 working days. So it's a bit scary. There's a lot of the country that does not have banks. I can't remember, is it in Yobe? One of the states today even said, look, they don't have enough banks right now to deal with this. And so therefore, what can CBN do? That is my take.
Thank you, Kemi. Prince, what the concept behind redesigning the naira and cash withdrawal limits that the CBN has come in of late, what do you think of the concept itself? The idea behind it that we should go cashless, that transactions need to be tracked when they're done electronically. We have more transparency about who has what, who is spending what. Every electronic transfer leaves a footprint, an online footprint. So clearly CBN is trying to sanitize the financial sector. Do you think the motives are pure? Do you think that the country is ready for it? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the power, the networks, the online networks? I mean, the rural areas, for example, how will they be able to do seamless electronic transfers when they have sporadic internet service? So is Nigeria really ready for these radical changes from being a cash economy to becoming a cashless economy that the CBN is trying to force and make happen by force at this time? Are we ready for this?
I think as a people, we are not. You said, is it sincere? I could say, okay, maybe 75% the CBN could be sincere. They said they act, empower the CBN to do what they are doing now. They're supposed to do it over a certain period of years and withdraw the money in circulation and they change the face or remint completely, alternate the colors. But when you now come back again, I want to do so many things at the same time. It's like trying to travel overseas. You don't have a passport, you've not gotten a visa, but you want to buy a traveling ticket. You need to take the process from the first, getting an international passport, applying to get a visa, before you come back and say, okay, let me buy my traveling ticket. Now, the CBN has about 3-4 different policies or programs modeled into one. In an election year, for a people who are illiterate in banking like we are, you know, because when we sit in the urban centers and say Nigeria is a wonderful place, we don't have any problem, it is because some of those people are forgetting that they are from villages. And our villages in Nigeria constitute the majority of our population. And that most of these people are disconnected. They are disconnected from reality. They don't know what we know in the urban centers. So when the CBN come and said the ATMs will get loaded with new currencies, those in the rural area, are they going to get the ATMs loaded with new currency when those of us in the urban centers don't even have the currency? So I think my take is that there's an agenda behind of this, either to make it impossible for certain players to have access to cash. Because for me, if you said you're doing mop-up and you want to mop up over 80% of the money circulation under some other people's bedroom, and yet up until now, you have just less than 10 days to go, and still you've not gotten more than half of what you claim you want to get. So what happened to the other half that you have not gotten? So for me, my take is that the CBN should listen to Nigerians. Everybody's feeling the pain. Do an extension. 6 months is not too much. You don't need to be in a hurry. So, okay, let's do a gradual withdrawal. The UK had just done that. They just changed their currency with the new king, and they are giving the citizen 3 years to return the old currency. Nigeria is not matured enough. We don't have the sophistication. We don't even have the manpower to do what greater countries like the British economy are not doing. And we want to do it just in 2 months. I think I'm very sure that we're going to have an extension. We've traveled this part before, and I'm sure we'll get back there again.
Thank you, Prince. So in sum, essentially, we are looking at the CBN to extend the deadline to mitigate the effects and the impact of this currency redesign and cash withdrawal limits on Nigerians. Having said that, why don't we look at another issue that relates to cash, which is kidnapping. Big in the news in the last couple of weeks was the kidnapping of victims, passengers on the train in Edo State. And what we discovered was that the state government rallied around very quickly and was able to rescue those victims, and they said they didn't pay any ransom. Within a week or so, not only did they rescue all the victims, they also arrested some of the alleged perpetrators, including 2 village chiefs who supposedly gave succor and assistance to the kidnappers. So that is starting to look like a very positive sign in terms of finding the solution, a permanent solution to this kidnapping problem that we have faced up to this point in Nigeria. The Edo denouement, the way it ended, is giving great hope to the fact that maybe our security personnel and architecture have finally got a handle. Because all along we've always said that kidnappers are not spirits, they're not ghosts. They use telephones to call for ransom demands. They use petrol to fuel their bikes and their generators. They have to buy food for themselves and for the victims. So they have to interact with somebody somewhere to keep the supply chain going, but so far they seem to have stymied government efforts to bring them to book. So Edo seems to be a case in point, and it was done very well. Prince, how do you see this playing a role? And also the fact that the government said they didn't pay any ransom. As you know, ransom is the incentive for why kidnapping is carrying on. Although there's a dispute on that issue with one of the relatives saying they actually paid 2 million, so we're not really sure what is true. But looking back in time to how kidnapping has become a lucrative industry in Nigeria, do you see any hope from how Edo has played out?
Thank you very much. I think Edo is a signal to what we failed to do from the onset. What we failed to do from the onset was that we blanked our mind to believing that there cannot be a successful kidnapping if there's no collaboration within. And now, when it happens, we choose, as a people, choosing to label a certain tribe as the only kidnappers that we have in Nigeria. So when it now happens, you look for the wrong, you look for the wrong criminal, leaving the main criminal the access to go, even if he's walking by you. Now, what happened in Edo was, okay, a few of those who felt cheated out of the settlement gave away those who were involved. So it made it a lot easier for the government of Edo and the security people to quickly nab those people, and they gave confessions. And the confession led to the hideout of the criminals. And that was what led to the quick rescue of the victims. So if we had played what they are playing out in Edo now, before in other states or in other regions of Nigeria, I am sure what we have today as kidnapping syndicate will not as big as it is. But because we choose to look a different direction and allow the criminals to do a free walk away. But now, Edo now is going to send a signal, maybe to the southern part of Nigeria, because what is happening in the northern part of Nigeria, you cannot use the Edo issue to solve them. Those guys have become like warlords in the northern region. They've taken territories. They now force people to pay them taxes to go to their farms. They force the kings to vacate their stools and all of that. So if we look at Edo and say, okay, what did they do right? What they did right was that they kick the criminals right in their houses. Now, if it is possible for those guys who felt cheated not to have been cheated, we will not be saying what we're saying today. If everybody that was just like 419, sorry for fraudsters, having a deal, and some felt, okay, I contributed more using my brain, my laptop, my data, so I should take more from this, then you should take less. So a case in study was, I think, 3 young Nigerians who were involved in Yahoo. I think they got 21 million, and the guy said, oh, my MAGA had not paid, so I am going to give you this, and I'll give you this. The other girl and the other guy got to know later that their friend actually got 21 million, and they set him up for kidnap. The guy was kidnapped. It was in collecting ransom. They now got to know that these are fraudster syndicate. So cheating themselves out of the deal was what gave Edo away. And I'm sure if the security apparatus work that way, then we'll get better results.
Kemi, when the reports of Edo first came out, they said they were herdsmen. At one point, they even said they were Fulani. Then, when the arrests occurred and the names started coming out, we saw they were all locals.
Oh.
And that seems to have even been what made it easier for the apprehension and the arrest to occur, was that there were people from that very area. So all of a sudden now we've maligned an entire ethnic group that had nothing absolutely to do with this, and they've already been labeled because they've been stereotyped that kidnapping is by herders. Do you think that it is a fair representation to say that kidnapping has suddenly become a lucrative enterprise as engaged in by every single sector of the country, as opposed to the way we have narrowly pigeonholed it to one group? And how do you relate this to what happened in Edo in terms of the perpetrators, the people actually involved?
First of all, I must commend Edo State for the speed in which this was handled. It was handled with a not on my watch, a zero tolerance approach. Secondly, as to whether a wrong set of people have been labeled, we don't know what happened. We don't know whether the perpetrators wore Fulani outfits to let people think that, look, there must be Fulani herdsmen. Honestly, we don't know. But I do believe that really the governor is the chief security officer of any state. Their security architecture and security framework must be all-encompassing. If you look at all the players right now, even in finding them, the traditional rulers, the hunters, the police, every layer of security honestly suddenly came out to find these people. And I honestly think if we have states that are doing that, where our security seems to be reactive. It's only when things like this happen, everybody runs around. Is there any state that can boast and say, look, our security detail is such that when this happens, before the end of the day, either from airtime, data, chatter, or so, or from checking the base stations, you would be able to see increased activity and know that something is afoot. As to whether we're labeling a part of the country or the other, the reality is there's excruciating poverty in the land. That's the reality. And I'm not making excuses, but poverty is causing people to do desperate and stupid things, all in the name of they want to feed. My colleague has spoken about the internet fraudsters. The kidnapping is sad because it could have been decisively dealt with at the beginning. And yes, efforts were made, but the efforts were not enough, such that it is now like an industry. And like you say, in the north, there are now players and rules of engagement and territories and all. We do hope that this is something that each of the states would deal with more decisively. I feel sorry for the rail industry, because the rail industry is sort of crumbling to its knees. Now, nobody wants to go anywhere by train, whether it is southwest or north, or nobody, because it's like, look, we are going to be exposed, and it is sad. It is sad. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kemi. It is sad indeed. And from what I hear you saying in terms of the states providing the security, that is starting to speak to state police, which speaks to restructuring, which is a very big issue in Nigeria today, which we will take up another day. But yes, indeed, definitely we are pleased that there is some advancement in this aspect, and that leads us to our next issue, which is a very big one. COVID is back. Or did COVID never leave? Did we just take our eyes off the ball for a minute? It was reported, as Yetunde mentioned in the news, that 42 new infections occurred in Nigeria in the previous week, and also in China. Apparently there's a new unknown flu. I think it might be a mutation of the coronavirus, and 3 Nigerians have died in China and 7 are critically ill. So initially when the story first broke, the federal government said, oh, we're not contemplating any restrictions in light of all of the stuff we suffered from the first lockdown. But as the number of infections begin to rise and people are starting to get sick again, the government is rethinking this. The secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, said over the weekend that the federal government is really seriously contemplating reintroducing some measures. Perhaps not a lockdown, but maybe asking things like face masks, like social distancing, like washing hands all over again. For those, Prince, who believe COVID was a scam from the beginning and just a way to make money, what does this say to the man in the street that all of a sudden, if it was a scam and they made their money and they were happy and they've moved on, why is it suddenly that we're seeing a resurgence again?
Yeah, thank you. I think COVID didn't leave us. COVID has remained in China since 2020. What has happened to us is we just choose to be indifferent. That because of the low fertility in Nigeria, that was why Nigerians just felt, once we are black, the sun is shiny, COVID cannot kill you. Now, COVID remained with the Chinese. They were the biggest, let me choose to use this word, exporter of COVID. But what we have done was pretend that it is gone. People are now getting to treat COVID as they treat malaria. Now using anti-malaria drugs to treat COVID, because it has now become so common. The symptoms of eye malaria and typhoid and that of COVID is the same.
It's just like the flu now.
So when you get it and you go to a lot of friends that I have treated COVID since after the lockdown. Now they go to the hospital, the symptoms, the doctor tells them the symptoms are this, you just get to stay at home for 3 days as you undergo your treatment, or you stay in the hospital while you undergo your treatment. So what we are having now is that the government are not suddenly waking up because Nigerians are just throw caution into the air. No regard again for the face mask. Nigerians in our usual way of always disregarding everything that had to do with her health until Nigerians had to wait to fall ill before they seek medical attention. So now the government is saying, I think we need to begin to wake up that COVID, you're still here. COVID never left. COVID never left. It will be impossible for for us to just wish that COVID has gone. So it's back now. It's always been here, but now it's creeping back to Nigeria. It's always, I have a few friends, not less than 5, who have undergone treatment in the last 12 or 16 months. So for us to not be thinking that it has left us since 2020 or since 2021, I think we're just deluding in illusion.
Thank you, Prince. Kemi, based on how our economy is now, can we afford, not even going to the extent of a lockdown, can we afford social distancing? Can we afford to start washing hands again? Can we afford to start buying face masks? Can our economy, we're still just recovering from the depredations of the first COVID pandemic effects. Can we so soon after afford to begin to have to face restrictions again? Is this something government should seriously consider?
I think that we can afford it because we have to look at what if we do not. The costs of not doing it is what we should compare to the costs of implementing it. And it is something that the private sector and the public sector will do. You have a lot of companies now that they adjusted their medical policy after COVID to include the things that they will do. I think for us, we just need for the government to continue to educate, It's up to each person, it's up to each home. How do you want to protect your husband, your wife, your kids? What activities do you want to do? Do you want to continue sanitizing? Do you want, when your kids go out, for them to use the mask? A lot of us have been empowered more than before. 2 years ago, we all didn't know what to do. But starting with the family, the establishment, the institution, the state, the government, we know the minimum steps to take. I'm not sure that we're ever going to have a lockdown. Even developed countries in the world, a lot of them were rioting, as in, look, they cannot afford a lockdown. But there are things that we ourselves can do. We know the basic things to do to take care of ourselves. And hopefully the impact in Nigeria, like we saw in 2020, will not be as much as the impact in other cold climates, where anytime there's winter and there's a flu, you have an upsurge in the COVID. But really, really, COVID is here, and now more worrisome, even kids are catching COVID for this particular this particular strain that we have right now. We continue to pray and continue to protect each and every one of our families and our offices.
Yes, and coming to think of it, how about vaccinations? All of a sudden, it seems like the entire vaccination exercise has just completely been abandoned. I remember that when we were at the height of the COVID fear, that vaccinations were an everyday thing, people were going, people were queuing, although there were some who didn't believe in it, but vaccinations actually played a major role. But that seems to have fallen by the wayside, as we generally do in Nigeria when we get complacent and relaxed about things. So perhaps it's a time for government to look into bringing back the notion of vaccinations for those who haven't had it yet.
All the vaccinations were always 72% effective, 80%, so maybe it's a residual 20% that we are suffering now. They were never 100% effective.
Absolutely,
never.
Because we know they were rushed to market because of the crisis situation at hand. And let's talk about our final story now, which for today, for this edition, which talks about politics again. You might have noticed the trend, as Yetunde mentioned, of our Nigerian politicians running to the UK to this institution called Chatham House, which supposedly, quote unquote, is something similar to our Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Yeah. It's its equivalent in the UK. And there are some Nigerians who've been asking that why do we have to go to the UK? The people we're talking to in the UK are not going to vote in our elections. Even Nigerians in the diaspora don't even have the facility to vote yet, let alone non-Nigerians, British people. That what is so important that seems that we have to go to the UK for validation? Is it that we have an inferiority complex? Is it that we still have this colonial mentality that our colonial masters need to validate us as individuals? And what is even more worrisome is that one or two of those who've been going to Chatham House have refused to address our people here in this country and prefer to go and speak to foreign people who have no say whatsoever in Nigerian elections. So, Prince, let's let you take that. What do you think about this whole concept of going overseas to go and address foreign agencies or foreign organizations and begin to tell them your plans as a candidate for Nigeria if you are elected, knowing that these people don't have any say in the outcome of the election?
Thank you. I think for me, I never like valuations done outside the shores of Nigeria, valuating any African leader or any African country. We're Africans. We have gotten our independence years ago, so we should be allowed to run ourselves the way we want to run ourselves. That is, you're the father of a child does not mean you're going to dictate to that child from age 1 to age 50. When the child gets of age, he leaves your home and begins to run his own family. So now for us, I think the biggest problem with the average Nigerian politician is complex that breeds ego. You know, because if it is not your ego issue, why would you imagine that an institution in the UK is more superior than an institution in your country that you are going to pass law or you're going to govern over? So why would you run to Chatham to talk to Nigerians from Britain? Some other people will say, when was the last time a British Prime Minister come to Nigeria and tell us the reason why he wants to be a Prime Minister? Or an American presidential candidate comes to Nigeria or come to an African country and tell us Africans the reason why he wants to become an American president for the benefit of African countries or African people. So for me, I don't see, and if you can't say that I will not attend a media event in Nigeria, I wouldn't attend any media event anywhere in the world. Let me talk to the people any which way I choose to, maybe in a stadium, in the marketplace, in a bus terminal, or on the streets. Okay, the media out of it for me, just like the former American president, Donald Trump, used to reject questions from the CNN journalists in the White House. He said, no, next question. You know, so for us, we can't travel that road. But the complex of the black mind, who still sees the white man as more superior. Some people will tell you, the British came here, they took us as slaves, and they're going to pay for it. And yet you want to go die in their country. You tell me because the infrastructures are better. We killed our infrastructures. The British people did not contribute to killing our infrastructures. If we have gained independence since 1960, that's 62 going 63 years ago, then by now we should be talking to ourselves that our country is better. No matter how bad it is, we're going to stay here and work it out. So I think the Chatham House thing cannot leave us because, like I said, the biggest problem of an average Nigerian politician is complex and ego.
Thank you, Prince Kemi. Some people have said we live in a global village now, that the world is so interconnected that when a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, it rains in Gambia, that the whole world is interrelated. Can you see a point of view that believes that you must engage internationally, and as a result, those who are going to Chatham House are already telegraphing the way they will interplay in global geopolitics? Can there be a basis extrapolated out of this Chatham Housization of Nigerian politics if you look at a global perspective? Does that justify this trend?
It does justify. For me, I think that the Chatham House is just a world stage. There's nothing else. I don't believe that we seem to be going back for validation. I believe Chatham House has a reputation providing an independent, objective platform for seeking to deepen democracy. So politicians feel as if for them to be taken seriously, they must speak from the Chatham House platform. Our current president right now, before the elections, he went to Chatham House. After the elections, he went to Chatham House. For him, I don't know why, a lot of times they give more foreign interviews than local interviews. So I think we should ask our press, what is it about us that is not allowing all these candidates to want to come and use Nigeria as a world stage? What is it about us that is causing our politicians to go to the Chatham House stage? It's self-validation. Because I listened to a lot of the interviews. I would be more interested if they went and addressed the Nigerian British or Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, so that at the end of the discussion, you can say, candidate 1, 2, 3, these are the plans that you have for our country and your country. Then I can come back and say, that was a good discussion. But other than that, all the conversations is really just self-validation. I went, I was invited, I went. I really, if you go online, anybody can go to Chatham House. There's a process. You can even apply to be a Chatham House member. So, but for them, in their, not little, in their own understanding, they feel there's validation from saying it from a Chatham stage. We just pray that very soon we would be able to have that kind of validation, or we'll be able to have that faith in our own Nigerian infrastructure, such that they can, even if you invite Chatham to come, so let it be Chatham Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. It's more acceptable, but really for them, they are touting their own personal horns, and they've gone, they've come back. Although there are some candidates that have not yet gone, and they're not the worse for wear. They're not.
Thank you. Perhaps our democracy will eventually evolve. We're still a work in progress, and so hopefully our democracy will evolve to the point where our candidates begin to feel that they have a local platform, that speaking here in Nigeria will give them the same sense of self-validation, self-worth, same sense of self-pride as they seem to be desperately seeking from foreign shores. And that's the much that we have for you today on this edition of What's Your Take. I want to thank my in-studio guests, Olukemi Onobanjo, thank you for joining us today. We've had great fun indeed. Prince Marcus Ogunshusi.
Thank you so very much. It's been a beautiful day.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank our audience for having spent some time with us. So.
Yes, indeed. And to all of Nigeria, we say thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and follow, subscribe to this program on TV 360, and we look forward to joining you again next Monday with a look at all of the stories that transpired during this week and bring in some additional guests from among those of you out there who will give us their take on what happened this week. Thank you and have a brilliant day.